So, good morning, and the universe is large. The universe is large. And it's one thing to read about what scientists speculate or their theories as far as the universe, its origins, its expansion, its vastness. It's another thing to see pictures, right? And so, have any of you kind of seen in the news, on the internet, TV, the images that came back from the James Webb telescope? Incredible, right? Incredible. So how powerful is this telescope? The Webb cameras can see as far as 13.6 billion light years away. Okay, light years. What's a light year? So a light year is measured by the time that light travels. So it's the fastest thing we can measure. So from the sun, which is 93 million miles from the earth, it takes 8 minutes for light to travel from the sun to the earth. 13.6 billion light years away. Whoa. Yes, I am an expert on this because I have read 2 articles. Okay, the thing I was most intrigued by were the cosmic cliffs, which were really, really very close to the Earth, only 7,600 light years from the Earth, so just like next door. And the cosmic cliffs are they're stellar nurseries, so it's actually where stars are born. And an interesting thing about the stars that were, imaged in the photos that have been displayed throughout this past week is a lot of them have burned out already because it's taken so long. So this place, the stellar nursery, actual stars are born there. So the images and the pictures take our understanding of the universe to a whole nother level, way beyond just what we can read about. The image, the picture, the scene matters. It awakens us on another level. So that's the universe. But faith is also a type of scene, and if you think the universe is vast, and we just know just a pebble, a grain of sand's worth as far as what we've seen in regards to the universe, faith is infinitely more, because faith doesn't see merely the creation. Faith sees the creator of the creation. So how incredible, mind-blowing, what we haven't seen as far as what can be seen of the universe. We, in faith, see the God who created the universe. And this is why we are Christians. Because Christ has come that we might not just see and marvel at the Creator, but have a living relationship, a saving relationship, become part of God's family. This is why faith is exciting. This is why faith is necessary. This is what we are made for. And so, how do we enter into a living faith? And I call it a living faith because you can have a faith that just sees and recognizes a presence, but a living faith transforms one's life in that they no longer see themselves as the same, they no longer live in the same way. They are now in relationship. So it's not like the cosmic cliffs, I'm just that's so wonderful to admire. No, a living faith is like a way of life. And so let's dig in. This is the adventure that God is calling us to have a living faith. And today we celebrate and hear about our father in the faith, which is, who is? Abraham, right? The first really called by God as he begins to form a people. And if Father Seth uses Eucharistic prayer number 1 today, we'll hear about how Abraham is our father in the faith. And being a father, he is our model of what faith is to look like. Not any kind of faith, but living faith. And this kind of living faith means that you're not a spectator in the stadium. You're on the field. Big difference. Big difference. We're not just observing and cheering. We're players in the game. And so we can kind of like draw out, extrapolate 4 essentials, 4 qualities, characteristics, 4 things that belong to living faith. First of all, in contrast to what we see of the universe, it's not a matter of like the telescope, we go out, we have to go out through the telescope to see what is there. No, living faith means first God comes to us. God takes the initiative. And so that's what we see here with Abraham, is that 3 men come and visit him. They're divine missionaries. They're divine persons. And so he doesn't go out, they come to him. God comes to us. This is the Christian, this is the Catholic faith. Emmanuel, God with us. And so this is the first thing we have to recognize when in regards to living faith. It's about God visiting us. Abraham receives a visitation. And what characterizes this visitation? It's in sacramental form. That means that God was present to him under the form of these 3 men. So there's an outward appearance in which he recognizes that the divine presence, God, who cannot be seen, is there in front of him. The second, what does Abraham do once he recognizes these divine persons who are under the human form? He doesn't sit and just admire them and then ask them for something that he needs. He immediately responds in a counterintuitive way, which I think it's not what he can get, what he can give. So the first thing he does is what? He looks to make and prepare a stewardship for them, a hospitality to provide for the divine visitors. So again, this is not probably in our fallen human nature, not our first instinct, because when we come before someone who's more powerful, we often move first to what? I wonder what I can profit by this. That's not the way he looks at it. And what does he do? They're in an impoverished situation, Sarah and Abraham. And so Abraham does what? Okay, we got to start what? Making bread. And so Sarah and Abraham look to provide a dinner. And then what does he do? This is the next level. He just doesn't provide flour and make bread and rolls. He goes out and chooses the choice steer. He slaughters the choice steer. That's their whole livelihood. Sarah's probably thinking, he is crazy, but I've been with him for 70 years. This is the way he rolls. And so it's not just any steer, it's the best. It's kind of like, you go to I heard that there's a restaurant in Wichita, you can go, there's a 16-ounce ribeye, that's $75. That's the steer that Abraham slaughtered. And by the way, I'm available for lunch, Okay, so that's what I would say. Secondly, what belongs to living faith, having true faith that brings about incredible fruit. The third is that it's about God's timing and that there's an urgency about it. How old is Abraham? How old are Abraham and Sarah? Over 90 years old. They're over 90 years old. How do they respond? Abraham hastened. He hurried into the tent and told Sarah. Then He ran to the herd to pick out a tender choice steer. He ran. How many 90-year-olds do you see running? Okay, so there's a sense of urgency that's involved in living faith. And it all stems from that first scene that he has had a visitation from God. That's where it originates and comes from. Then this movement of a sacrificial offering of the best. And it's done in an urgent way. And then the fourth component of what we see of living faith is that it does ultimately result in God's blessing. Because what happens? The divine visitors make a promise that Sarah and Moses will what? They will expect a child who is going to be Isaac, right? Who is going to be a formator of the people of God and God's mechanism, vehicle for saving the world. So it's, Father Seth, you've just been a priest a little over a month and a half. Probably in your lifetime, you're not going to be baptizing any newborn children from 90-year-old parents, okay? We laugh because it's crazy, but and Sarah laughed, but this is how God works. So the four elements, what properly belongs to living faith is this recognizing of the divine visitation, that God comes to us. The immediate response of a sacrificial, generous gift, the urgency, the running, in order to respond to that gift, and then the credible fruit in which God blesses this encounter. So what do we need to do then? Well, we need opportunities to be able to express living faith. And so if you think God was close to Abraham, God is closer to us. In sanctifying grace through baptism, God dwells within us so that we receive visitations from God himself. As Father Seth mentioned, this weekend we're kicking off our capital campaign, and this has been in the process for about a year and a half, a discernment process, lots of conversation, lots of prayer. And in the beginning, I was terribly uninspired around it because it was like $1.8 million in deferred maintenance. So heating and cooling, roof, not the church roof, that's been replaced, but everything to the north. And so it's like, oh, this is something that we have to do. It's like, this is a meal we have to provide. But after prayer and lots of conversation and kind of denying myself in a sense, I began to see and I think others are seeing too, that this is actually a divine visitation. God is coming to us under the appearance of this campaign. And it can look very ordinary, but living faith, Abraham faith, sees the presence of God before what appears to be something ordinary and human. And so we are invited to something wonderful. And here's the cool thing about Magdalene, which makes it difficult also. Magdalene is not made up of millionaires and billionaires, maybe like some parishes. Magdalene is made up of a lot of families that the only way that we can respond as a church, as a parish, as a church body to the divine visitation is that it has to be together. All of us have to be, for it to work, a living faith to work, and to see the incredible fruit that can come forth, it will take all of us. And it begins with me. So I was the first to make the gift. It wasn't 7 million, but for a priest, it felt like 7 million. And so I'm inviting you to join me. So this opportunity, this divine visitation, we've set it up as kind of a maintenance and mission vision. The maintenance being the deferred maintenance and some classrooms that are needed. So this is part of what's called the first tier of the capital campaign. And so the first tier, and once we hit this amount, then we can go forward. We don't have to hit the total amount before we can start any of the projects. The first tier is 3.7 million, and it includes the infrastructure projects and the school expansion. We're not going from 2 classrooms to 3 classrooms per grade. That will never, ever happen during my time, never, never. But education has become much more specialized than it was 40 years ago, 45 years ago when I was in school. Everybody was lumped together, the most talented and the least talented, and if you didn't make the cut, you're flunked. Now, it's much more individualized and specialized to be able to accompany kids where they're at, and that takes more classrooms, more space. And so now what we're seeing, and there'll be opportunity for tours, is that some of the current spaces for these specials are in what were originally designed to be bathrooms. They've been repurposed, so they're really small, right? Okay, so that's the first tier. The second tier, which is my favorite, is the discipleship center. What I call the discipleship center is the school for adults. The school to learn and live living faith. And I think it's the most important for the future even of our school. You know how we talk about like, oh, the kids are our future, the youth are our future. That was true before, but we're missing something right now that if we don't get this right, the kids aren't going to be our future because there won't be a future. The future is our adults. If our adults do not have this living faith, this faith that can recognize the divine visitation, is ready to respond sacrificially and generously, with urgency, we will not see fruit. Here's the way it works. 20 years of priesthood, Catholic schools the whole time seeing Catholic schools. If parents do not have this living faith, that's what the whole purpose of the discipleship center, it's only by exception that the kids will. It's a waste if the parents do not have it. That's why the importance of us investing in creating and building up Abraham-like faith. And this can't happen as individuals. It happens in small groups. We currently have 88 different groups that use less than 5 spaces throughout the month. So some meet weekly, every other week, some meet once a month. But those numbers of groups are growing, and we're wanting them to grow because it really is about small group journeying together that builds up and gives a vision and inspiration for this living faith. So that's the second tier. That's once we reach 5.9 million. So the first tier, 3.7, second tier, 5.9, and then the final tier, 7 million, which is the expansion of the Adoration Chapel. So a lot of you have holy hours. If you'll go in the morning, there'll be 14 or 15 people at times in that chapel. So the chapel's not tiny, but it is incredibly tight. And so it would expand the chapel to 30, a capacity of 30, which would actually allow a teacher to bring a whole classroom of kids in, which to me is exciting. Talking about forming kids in the way of prayer, spending time before the Blessed Sacrament. And then the portico, which was part of the original plan of the Magdalene campus 20 years ago, but because of insufficient funds, that was one of the projects that were removed. A lot of people have voiced, and they did through the feasibility study that we had, of the need for protection and covering for entering and exiting the church, especially like weddings and funerals. So those are the 3 projects. There'll be tours after Mass to learn a little bit more about those projects. But I want, again, like, this can actually happen. But it's not going to be a billionaire or a millionaire who contributes 2 to 3, 5 million, a couple gifts. The Lord is inviting us to something special at Magdalene. He's inviting us to express Abraham-like faith that seems kind of foolish. But if we can step out into this to really risk, because that without risk there is no faith, and to have this living faith, there will be great fruit, and it will bear great fruit for the future. God has plans for Magdalene, not because of me, not because of you, but because of the love of God, who so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. And he wants to take our parish to the next level. And we are receiving a divine visitation. And it is now for us to respond.